Hi everyone, I'm Emma Perry, as Denise said, the grants officer on the Empowering Women's grant scheme. Ali, are you all right to start the presentation now? We'll go, yeah, thank you. Okay, so yeah, we hope you find the information useful today. We'll drop in our email address at the end if you want to get in contact, if we don't cover anything you were expecting or you would just like to ask us a question. So today's agenda, next slide please, yeah. So today's agenda is a brief overview of the Empowering Women's Grant Scheme, lessons learned from the grant scheme. Then we'll go into top tips for grant applications, then planning applications, and then we've got a little group exercise which will be around looking at an unsuccessful grant application to our grant scheme. Also, if we have time, sharing success, and we will go on to the last section, which is the Q&A. So I will go straight into the presentation now. What is the Empowering Women's Grant Scheme? The Empowering Women's Fund is part of the Labyrinth Project, which is a tampon tax-funded grant scheme led by Solace Women's Aid. The funding was to address the needs of more joined-up, holistic, women-centred services to respond to a range of issues affecting women's lives that had been intensified by the COVID-19 pandemic. These issues included violence against women and girls to financial, employment and legal issues, and the grants were available in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The aims of the grant scheme was to support sustainability of women's groups in local communities and help women get into an empowered position. We were particularly looking for projects that would improve women's mental health, well-being, increasing confidence and employment skills, and support to sustain these improvements and increase independence. Also, decrease social isolation, increase women's ability to participate in community activities, improve women's financial resilience and employability, increasing their roots out of poverty, gaining confidence and support to secure a stable financial future. Next slide, please. So that kind of covers what the grant scheme's aims were and what we were looking to fund in. I thought what would be really helpful is to give a breakdown of particularly the top reasons why grant applications weren't funded or weren't successful. The number one reason was the sheer number of applications. We received 613, which totaled to 9.3 million, and we only had 300,000 to allocate in funded projects. The next was impact. A large number of applications only spoke about the impact of COVID-19, but did not give details on the actual impact of the project and the change it would make. A large number of very good projects scored lowly in the assessment process due to not demonstrating clear outputs and outcomes. And lastly, budget, not given enough detail on budget lines and how they related to the project. Next slide, please. So these are the top tips that from our learning, and also we've got a fabulous grant writer on our team, which has also shared her knowledge. So I will start with the planning. We felt planning is key. The more clearly you plan what you'd like to do and how you'd like to carry it out, it's easier to present your project and its aims and objectives. The following is really important to consider. The why. Have you identified the need for this project? Why is your project important? The what. What are you going to do and what will happen as a result of it? The who. It's really important to think about not just your direct, but also your indirect beneficiaries and where. Where will your project take place? Is there anything specific about this area that makes your work a funder's priority? And how will your work add to this community? Less is more Competition for funding is currently very high, and we feel it's better to focus on efforts rather than going for everything. A fund we recently applied to had 10,000 applications. Do try and get in touch with the funder to see if the fund is the right fit for you. Stories and examples. Tell your story, where you have been and where you want to go, and don't forget to tell the funder about your experience and track record. Try to avoid using jargon or acronyms and make sure you stick to word count. It always helps to double check your budget so it adds up correctly, and make sure that you've included all these supported requested documents. Be very clear on your budget items, why you're requesting, so funders understand wherever these items are core costs or project costs. We also recommend when you apply, do not apply for more than half the current income, as your funders want to make sure that you have the track record to handle the grant. Next slide, please. So these are the top tips from our grant writer that works here at Solace. The first one being research the funder, read their website thoroughly and try to check if they have funded something similar in the past, wherever they tend to fund the same thing over and over again, or if they only fund different things every time. Check their wider strategy and aims, and try to show in your application how your project will reach this wider strategy. Use buzzwords, just like a job application. It helps to include words from the fund description and guidance in your application. You may have your own terms and way of speaking about things, but it definitely helps to include terminology used by the funder, which you will find on their website or in their strategy. Funders love innovation. Try to package your project as being a new idea, or you could demonstrate it's a new way of working for your organisation or for the sector. Don't overpromise. Make sure you can realistically deliver the project. It also helps to show that you have the required staff in place to safely deliver the project. Thank you. So some more top tips from our grant writer is using numbers and bullet points can help with clarity and with word counts when you're doing the application. Have one person write the application. Too many authors can lead to confusion of tone and style in the application. The feel. Everything you write, your application needs to trigger emotion, and your passion for the project needs to shine through. Have a trusted external person read your application to ensure that the focus and impact of the project is clear and understandable to an outsider, which basically means if you're able to have somebody to read over your application at the end that isn't within your organisation.
Thanks, Emma. Bear with me 1 minute. I'm just going to move the spotlight around. Great. So hopefully those tips have been very helpful for you. We're now just going to talk a little bit particularly about monitoring and evaluation when planning applications. As funders, we found it really helpful to know how progress is tracked and how impact is measured when assessing applications. This helped us know that we can tell when a project has been successful and objectives have been achieved. It's also helpful to know that there are ways for grantees to learn from their work and adapt accordingly. And regarding the Empowering Women Fund in particular, we also felt it was helpful to have this information to feed into wider learning for the sector. So we thought it could be useful to share an evaluation and learning framework to use when you are planning your project and writing your application. And this framework comes from our own external evaluators who are evaluating the Labyrinth Project. So firstly, clarify your current position and your ultimate goal. This involves asking, where are we now and where do we want to be? What are the issues that we are seeking to address? And what are the big changes that we want to make through our project? Number two, setting out the outcomes that you want to achieve. This involves asking, What will be different for the people we work with if we are successful? What other changes will be seen? 3, planning the activities needed to achieve your outcomes. Ask yourself, what will we need to do to achieve changes? What activities and services will we provide, and why do we think they will work? Step 4, setting out some milestones. This involves asking, how will we know we're on track? What will be achieved in 6 months, 12 months, or 2 years' time? 5, planning what evidence you will collect. This involves asking, how will we know we're reaching our milestones and outcomes and show others we've reached them? What are our indicators of success? And number 6, building in time and processes for reflection and learning. This involves asking, how will we learn from our project's journey? How will we share our learning with others? So, in addition to having a framework, when writing your application, it is helpful to ensure you have clearly stated the following for your project, as these can be easily confused, and a funder may therefore not fully understand what the intended impact of your project is. So when thinking about writing it, think about your outputs. So these are the tangible results of your activities. Outputs are a quantitative summary of an activity. For example, if you are providing workshops, your output might be 100 women attending 10 financial skill workshops over 10 weeks. Topics for the workshops would include CV writing, interview skills, and workplace skills. Differently, your outcomes, so these are separate to your outputs. These are the benefits that your project or intervention is designed to deliver. The change that occurs as a result of the activity. For example, women will have improved employment skills and will have increased confidence in seeking employment. And finally, your indicators. These are ways of knowing that change has happened, the data that helps you assess your impact. So, for example, at least 80% of the women attending the workshops will report increased confidence in seeking employment. When thinking about your indicators, it's important to think that you can tell both whether the outcome has occurred, and if so, by how much, so the distance traveled. That's obviously a very quick stop on outputs and outcomes and indicators, but you can look at these resources to help you find out more. And on our Centre for Excellence website, we've also got a few documents on monitoring and evaluation and planning, which again comes from our external evaluators, which may be of some help.
I thought it'd be really helpful to have a group discussion on an application that we received that wasn't successful. Alia will explain our eligibility criteria, which I think will be helpful before we go on to the actual application form. I'll just hand over back to Alia to talk through the eligibility criteria of our grant scheme.
Thanks, Emma. So yeah, before Emma talks about the example application, just to give a bit of background. So the eligibility criteria for our application scheme was the following. So the projects had to be led and by and for women. They had to have a charitable purpose. We were trying to fund smaller organisations. So we had a ceiling of less than £1 million in income per year. We did have kind of slightly larger grants and then seed funding grants. So for the slightly larger grants, we did ask for a written governing document and that the organisation had been active for at least 1 year. The grants that we gave out were available for England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And we asked that the applicants had their own bank account and a safeguarding policy. In terms of what we were trying to fund or are trying to fund, we had quite a broad range of aims for the grant scheme. So that included improving women's understanding of the law and access to legal advice, improving confidence, mental health and well-being, helping to build the capacity of organisations, so to help them formalise their structures, improving women's financial resilience and employability, and decreasing isolation and supporting marginalised communities. And in terms of what we were able to fund, so again, this was quite broad, but generally we were funding staff costs and costs to deliver the project, so direct project costs. We did allow for some core funding, so running costs up to 15% of the total funding requests, and we could also fund volunteer costs. So back to Emma.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak through this application, which came in. It was for 25,000, and it was under the heading of increasing confidence and well-being. So the aim of the project, the funding was to re-establish women's esteem, their recovery as individuals within the family and the community in the social and employment fields. This is especially after the harm inflicted during the pandemic lockdown and restriction. And it goes on to say many women became isolated and vulnerable during the pandemic and have lost their self-esteem, become anxious, and their trust in the outside world, including loss of employment. And we wish to provide a safe space for them to regain and restore the energy's trust, receive financial advice, and help with regaining employment. And then goes on to the physical result is, the result of our work will be the improvement of both mental and physical abilities and building up of self-esteem, which has suffered greatly during the pandemic. On the social side, we endeavour to organise events where they will contribute to as well as take part and benefit from. So recording changes, which is like the monitoring and evaluation. We will keep confidential records of circumstances, names and addresses, activities, events, advice and monitoring. The results, impact, success of the project. We will also plan to develop the project or take it further into the following year. One of the things before we go on to, you can go back to the budget, I'll speak about that. So the requested amount was 25,000 and their turnover was just over 500,000. And below is the budget items, which I won't go into too much detail. But I wanted to make clear that one of the things when we were assessing applications, we were not looking at content in respect of people's ability to write a clear application, grammar, spelling and things like that. We just took it on the value of the idea and how well they were able to explain what the impact would be. Is there anyone that would like to comment on how they would fix or improve this application that's joined today?
Feel free to unmute yourself or put your hand up.
I mean, if not, I mean, if you really don't, I mean, me and Ali can go over it and give a bit, if you'd prefer that. We just thought it might be interesting.
I could say a couple of things.
Yeah.
I don't mind adding.
Hi, my name is Suman. I can say a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is I quickly looked at the budget and it was less than 25,000 for a start, and I don't know what it was. But you were talking about putting individual stories in there. I might have put a couple of stories about women who have experienced that kind of isolation and sort of losing confidence over the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obvious things, and maybe some of the detail on like the safe place, like what would they do in the project? Some idea would be good. That's all I can kind of see immediately.
No, they're incredibly good actually, and actually these are the things that we were looking for when we were assessing the application. So you're totally on the right track. I mean, the fact that the budget didn't total could have been sort of like a foul at stage one of the assessment, but obviously we kind of pushed this one through to second stage because there was something within it that we liked. Emily and Caroline, you have your hands up. Do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you.
Hi.
Hi, based on just what you've shared so far, we thought that it's lacking some data from wanting to re-establish women's self-esteem and talk a little bit more in terms of using the buzzwords which you've mentioned as well. Making sure that there is actual feature of stories of the women that they've encountered in their research.
Yeah, I was going to echo, just to echo that. If there's any case studies, I think that would be really useful to see. And some of the bits that you touched on earlier in terms of the outputs, the outcomes, and indicators, I think it would be great if that was clearly outlined. So far, that's what we've
and I think
the number of women they were targeting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the last point you made was a really, really good one. I think actually the reason that it was not successful is that we just couldn't gauge what the impact would be, you know, what the outcomes and outputs would be. And because of the number of applications, it was just on the weaker side. So yeah, it got rejected. But yeah, that was, really good. Thank you. Next person, is that Georgina?
Georgia, we're part of Collaborative Women, and I've got
hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Hi, it was just it's not clear what they're actually going to deliver. It would be good to have, we'll deliver X amount of workshops, X amount of this, what it will be, what those will be about. I guess devil in the detail is what I was going to say.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I mean, I did cut this down quite a bit. It was quite wordy, but it didn't actually have that detail. You couldn't actually tell what they were going to do.
Yeah, and obviously then the output, outcomes, and
impact. Yeah, exactly. So the next is that Collaborative Women? Yeah.
Yes, we're just working from two different sites.
Hi.
Another member of Collaborative Women, Grace McCorkle. It's not reference to the example, but it's also from a point of view as, say, a funder. Is there movement within the sector to look at things more creatively? So as my colleagues Jan and Georgia has mentioned, methods and detailed information, but also from the point of view of how you're going to deliver, and that could be presented in more creative way, other than, because you've said it was quite a wordy document. The market or the sector of more creative ways to
submit an application. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I mean, there is a lot of work at the moment being done by funders looking at application processes. I don't know how far along they are, but some of the bigger ones like Comic Relief, I guess like your Henry Smiths and your Paul Hamlins, those sort of organisations, they're actually looking at doing part of the application by like video, which they have done for their smaller. So it'd be a video application with a little bit of written, which would be sort of like the details about the budget and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it is getting there. I think it's still a long way. And I think, as you might have realised, that post-pandemic, a lot of funders are looking at their strategy at the moment and changing things quite dramatically. So I think you will see a lot of changes, but I don't think they're going to roll out as quickly as we would like them to. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Really good to hear.
I go to a lot of these network meetings, and I'm always plugging for, like, you know, I'm like, campaigning for more accessible applications, you know, better understanding of the women's sector and the needs. So yeah, hopefully we'll get there.
and also in terms of, I think sometimes it can also be a little frustrating. Outputs, outputs, indicators can also within different spaces be called who, what, how, why. Crossover and impact, and again, if it's something that is more standardized to say, right, how many, who your target is.
I agree, and I think that's the change. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I know there is work being done, but I think the issue is that a lot of funders just, they are getting better, but it's always been, then they weren't very open to working together, which they did on the Community Response Fund, which was for the pandemic. I mean, you had about 25 funders working together, so they've demonstrated they can do it. And also that they did it with quite short application forms. So I'm hoping that the learning out of that and the experience will sort of in the future will have shorter and better application forms. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we're definitely, as Emma said, trying to do, you know, our part. So we have tried to join different groups, for example, like with the Rosa Fund and others where we can, and sort of talk about, you know, us trying to be more accessible and yeah, trying to be more open to different and smaller groups as well. I see Georgia's hand is still up. Is that from before, Georgia, or did you want to say anything further?
Oh no, it's from before. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. Oh, the Collaborative Women also have their hand up again. Did you also want to?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to ask a question which I was going to put in the chat before.
Yeah.
For clarity, Solace, do you fund organisations that fit under the traditional charity registered status as well as CIC groups?
Yeah, so basically we don't have any further funding to distribute, but we did. We were funding across the board. Basically, as long as you could prove that you had a charitable purpose, you didn't have to be sort of traditional charity. A lot of our kind of funding went to CICs, informal small groups. It was more to demonstrate that there was a social impact and the work they were doing was charitable.
But we did also, yeah, fund charities as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And as Emma said, this was the first time that we'd done kind of a grant scheme, like a national external grant scheme, and we'd love to do it again. We just haven't been able to secure the funding to do that as of yet, but hopefully that will happen at some point. But yeah, as I said, you know, we wanted to share the learning from what we have done, and then also hope that we can maybe impact on the sector as a whole. Might be a big ask, but we'll try. And just get different funders to think about, I think, particularly the needs of buy-in for women's organisations, and within that, marginalised community organisations as well.
Emma, I just wanted to bring up that Valerie in the chat, if we go back to the application, also mentioned that there should be more timeframes in this application, and that there isn't really any indication of a schedule or a timeframe.
Yeah, I mean, like what not being clear about funding deadlines and stuff. Yeah, I agree. And I think you'll see if you go onto a lot of funders' websites now, they have taken that on a board, and they actually have dates now when their panel meetings are, and when you'd have to get in your application to go to that panel. So I think things are slowly improving. It is taking a bit of time.
And I think also, sorry, Emma.
Yeah, go on. Yeah,
in the application as well, in this application, they didn't really put any timescales for when they would deliver things as well. So yeah, that's another. Oh
yeah, sorry. Is that what? Yeah, I'm still on the. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree. Sorry.
That's right. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Do we have any more comments on this application? No. Emma, shall we move on?
Yeah. So next bit. So here I've just put some sort of details, not too many, on funding resources. I mean, one of them is we send out a newsletter every other month, which is basically tailored to the women's sector. So yeah, I'd definitely sign up for it. The next one would be, I find really useful, is sort of signing up for funders' newsletters, because that way you're kind of like aware of like grant schemes that are opening up in the future, but also if they're having like a change in strategy and stuff like that. The other one that I use all the time is Grants Online, which I've put the website, and that's a brilliant website. Basically, it's updated daily and weekly, and it has all the details of the current grant schemes that are national. The other one that's worth looking at is a lot of people don't think about local authorities. They always run grant schemes and are actually, if you fall within their catchment area, which is you're located in that borough, they're more likely to fund you. And then the next one slide, please. Another thing I do is I follow Grants Online on Twitter and all the funders that I'm interested in, and also they kind of announce when grant schemes are coming out. So that's another way if you don't want to sign up for their newsletter. The last bit of advice that I would give is basically research your funders, and I would definitely, because I used to work for quite a large funder, request a phone call with you. I mean, grant staff are normally really happy to have a chat with you if you're eligible, but also signpost you to relevant funding opportunities. So often they will be aware of what's going on in the funding landscape, opposed to sort of like Grants Online, which is more commercial. Yes, that's the last. Next slide. So we weren't sure if people would be up for this or not, but if you're not, that's perfectly fine. We were just wondering if there was anyone here today that would like to share any of their success stories or learning from applying for a grant with a group. Put your hands up. If not, happy to move on to the Q&A session if you would prefer that. We've got like 25 minutes. So is there anyone that would like to share any of their success stories? Yeah, we've got a couple. Brilliant. Shall we start with who hasn't spoken yet? Valentina, who is our grants writer at Solace.
Hi. So I think more than sharing a success story, I wanted to just briefly go through my experience with this specific grant. As my colleagues know, I was actually one of the applicants. So I volunteered for an organization in the women's sector. Before joining Solace, I saw this grant that was issued by them. And I put in an application, and I was 100% sure that it was perfect, and 100% sure that it would have been on point, very concise, like showing as much as I could everything that the organization was doing. And then the fun bit is that it actually got rejected. So like this is more to bring my experience and say, like, even though it got rejected in the end, like I am working for Solace. So it's never about your values, your value as writers. It's never about your actual skills. It's more about focusing. So never take it personal whenever an application that you were sure of doesn't go through, because it's usually, it does have so many other factors to be taken into account that as a bid writer, my feeling every time that I get a rejection is that somebody is evaluating in a negative way my work. Well, that's actually never the case. We're always sort of like fighting against, pass me the word, but so many other people and so many brilliant ideas that maybe it's the certainty of having been super good that sort of prevents us from achieving what we want. As Emma was saying before, most of the times we know the organization so well and we have such a clear idea of the project that we're like requesting funds for, that we don't explain it clearly to the funder. We're overexcited about it. We believe in it incredibly much. Potentially, we have also contributed to the creation of the idea itself. So probably we don't explain it clearly enough to the reader. and we don't let them fully understand the process behind what we actually want to apply. So yeah, just to wrap it up, it was mainly to say that whatever negative judgment you have, it's never towards you. So always ask for feedback to whatever funder. Some of them are not going to answer, but some of them are actually going to give you very, very useful things that you will be able to recycle in the future for them or also for other organizations.
Thank you so much, Valentina.
Thank you again, Valentina. That was so helpful to share your learning and your experience of applying to our grant scheme. Shall we go on to the Q&A section now?
Yeah. So I think just, do you have any questions from today? Anything kind of in general, which we can try to answer? We may have to go and think about it potentially, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions maybe that people have. Or not. We were so good that we didn't have any questions.
Yeah. I think I do have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the women sector, obviously we are all operating from a different level. Mm-hmm. And most of the groups that are women-led have just come up since COVID started. Do we have this network developing bid writers to support these groups and to monitor their work in terms of reporting as well, rather than giving grants and just leave them to make mistakes and then judge them on those mistakes? Do we have anyone who is supporting women in this network to sort of support with bid? Let's say I write my own bid. I'm not very good. My English is not very great. And can I give it to someone to work with me, either for a payment or to get that support during the time of developing a grant application? Just to know, please.
I think it's an absolutely great idea, and it would be one that we would love to develop. I'm not sure it's 100% within our power. What I would say maybe is our project is running till the end of September, and we are available most of the time. You know, if you did have an application and wanted to send it to us to have to cast our eye over, we'd be very happy to do that. I think in terms of developing a big network on it, maybe we can try and do that. I think we could have a think about it. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to maybe call on my colleague Bernice here because she's been doing a lot of outreach and network building. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. So we'll go away and think about that. But Faith, in the meantime, you know, we're around until the end of September. So if you did want us just to have a look over an application, we'd be very happy to do so.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Directed to yourself.
Yeah, we should have the Labyrinth email. I'll put it in. Oh, Bernice, would you mind putting it in
I
the
think
chat?
I have it from.
You have it. Okay, great. Yeah,
yeah.
you just send it to that, and we'd be very happy to look over it. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, Emma, I kind of took over there. Apologies.
No, that was a really good response. Yeah, definitely. Should we go on to Kelly? Hi, Kelly.
Hiya. I just wanted to clarify what you were saying about applying for, was it 50% of the project costs? Was that what you were saying, or was that specific to just your grant?
So yeah, I get what you mean. So basically we were saying that the majority of funders wouldn't, if you were applying for more than 50% of your annual income. So basically if your annual income was 60 and you were applying for 35, they probably wouldn't be very comfortable with funding you, just because it's such a large sort of bit of income to come in when you grant. Does that make sense, Alia? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's often the funders can be quite conservative and risk averse, basically. So yeah, with that, we recommend that you don't apply for more because they want to see that history of being able to manage grants of that size. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't. I mean, there are a lot of situations where funders do, but they would have a meeting with you and look at how you would manage that large grant, and they'd probably pay it in instalments rather than all up front.
Okay, and just continuing from that in terms of percentages, I've been told by on sort of previous sort of grants workshops that you should never really apply for more than 15% of your core costs.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, unless it's the funder. So, for instance, ESME, they will fund basically all overheads. So if you put in a grant application to them, they will pay 100% of what your overheads are, or 50%, whatever it is. They don't have that. So basically, you want to look at what funders' eligibility is and requirements. But yeah, generally it is 15%, but there are a couple of funders out there that do pay like the total. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Emma, if I can say a couple of words.
Yeah, please do.
I think in general, whenever we apply for something that is bigger than 50% of our budget, it means that potentially we are running a project that is bigger than the organization itself. So let's say, as Emma made the example, if I have an annual income of 60,000 and I'm applying for a project that is 30,000, that project is gonna add such a massive chunk of work to my organization that the problem is not the funding itself, it's rather the funder asking himself or herself, are they gonna have the capacity to actually run it? So it's not just about the money, but it's just about, in comparison with your actual income, the dimensions of the project. I think from my past experience at least, I tended to always go for very, very big amounts and try to cover as much as possible every core cost, especially if the organization that I was working for was very financially unstable. The idea is that a grant can literally save the organization and make it go further or like collapse if not awarded. That reasoning, that sort of like panic, pass me the word, that comes with it's always counterproductive. It's gonna pass to the founder. They're gonna realize that you're actually applying out of need more than out of targeted interest. So as much as possible, even if we need something like 100K, let's break it down always and understand exactly what we need it for. Do we need it for an art project? Do we need it for a seminar? Do we need it? And then after have broken it down, it's definitely going to require more work, but it's necessary to apply for different funds. Possibly smaller, and again, possibly is going to require more work, but it increases the chance that it's actually going to be approved. I'm not sure if I wasn't clear, please let me know.
That was very clear. Such good advice, Valentina. I couldn't have put it better. But yeah, that's why we have our fabulous grant writer here with us.
Thanks.
Emma, could I just say something? I think thank you for that, Valentina. I think that's that is really insightful in terms of our journey at Collaborative Women, knowing one, the passion, but passion can only lead you so far. You also have to be strategic in terms of how you're managing your financial expectations from funders. The thing I wanted to add before Valentina came in, it was really to parts of what Faith had asked. One of the things I think for us at Collaborative Women, we've done a lot more of in the last couple of years is working, partnering and working more collaboratively with different organisations in order to, one, build the skill sets to be able to get, say, significant funding applications go through, but to be able to uplift and upskill not just our own organisation, other organisations as well. Is this something that is well received within the funding space? We encourage, and I think partly to answer to Faith's question around helping and upskilling the sector, because let's face it, this is a great opportunity for us to do this workshop, but it's also a specialist area in terms of people who are skilled at writing bids, whether it's for a couple of thousand or it's for a couple of 100,000. They are skilled individuals, and we know the highs and lows of our own journey, as I said. But is there a movement within the funding space to encourage more collaboration in order, one, to meet the target, as Valentina said, as far as meeting our capacity to show it's not just led on passion, but it is a strong framework of the need of the work to be done, and also upskilling two or multiple organizations to get a particular project through, and we all lead by our strengths as opposed to overreaching ourselves, and then to have the space for an individual organization to help with putting a application together or looking at and reviewing an application. What's the movement and the appetite in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be able to cover some of that, and maybe Alia or Valentina might be able to step in. I mean, from my knowledge at the moment, what funds are really looking at are partnerships, but also partnerships outside the normal partnerships that you would have. And that is one thing they're really keen on, is how to sort of resolve an issue as a community and getting those organisations that have a stakeholder possibly in your project, getting them involved. I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. But that was such a good question. I don't know, Alia, Valentina, have you?
I mean, I don't obviously have the history in the funding sector as you do, Emma, but I mean, from the, from the different groups that we've joined. So, for example, Emma and I went along to a few meetings of the ACF, the Association for Charitable Foundations. And there definitely was talk in there about encouraging partnership working and collaborative working. I mean, I think, as Emma said before, with the changes to funding applications, I don't know, it seems quite slow maybe, and there's probably like more work to be done and encouragement to be done. I mean, our project's very time limited, but we were hoping to offer some kind of thought leadership in a way on this and encourage this. So I think, again, we've got our Centre for Excellence website where we're trying to gather sort of learning from this project, but also from our grantees. And I think that's something that we could definitely try and talk about through that, is that encouragement of community and partnership and collaborative funding. Absolutely. Valentina, are you unmuted? So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with you. So from my experience and from my perspective, I think collaborative work is necessary, like 100% from so many points of view. So the first thing is that definitely whenever you're collaborating with someone else, you're also addressing multiple needs. So obviously all of us have different specializations and all of us have different key strengths. So from a funder perspective, I think it's always very interesting to see how we can collaborate to enhance inclusiveness, because obviously the more, let's say, smaller organizations we can bring in a project, the more we are able to address multiple needs. I'm thinking of an application we put in that didn't just involve charities, but also the private sector. It's not a demon to fight. Sometimes, for example, especially when it comes to digitalization, that is like a massive trend right now. It's always good to sort of like bring in people that do this for a living. They can help us out. From our perspective instead, so from a charity perspective, collaborating with others always allows us to share knowledge and to learn from others. This doesn't mean that we're going to become a buy-in for organization necessarily, but if, for example, tomorrow morning we start collaborating with an organization for a specific project with an organization that supports people with disabilities, then in the next project, potentially, I'm gonna, for example, create a dissemination activity that is gonna address best the needs of people with visual impairments. So every small learning that we can get from one project can also be transferred to others. So overall, collaboration can really bring a lot of very, very positive results.
Thank you. Just one more thing I will add. You know, I think, as you said, we would love to do more, and we're trying to do things like, you know, have these workshops, and also on the Centre for Excellence, we are looking to maybe have some more resources and kind of toolkits that can help people with applying for funding. But I think, yeah, there are structural issues, aren't there, across the funding sector, that we are all kind of in competition with each other, and I think trying to get out of that mindset and actually work with each other is quite difficult to do. And obviously we want to encourage that, and we also would like to, as you said, build the capacity and upskill people and get those people with specialized skills to support smaller organizations. I think, you know, with the time limit that we have, we're a bit stretched to do that, but maybe at least we can get those conversations going and try different things. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, definitely do get in touch. I think we've dropped our email address. We're really happy to talk to people one-to-one about your application, or sort of if you just want to talk through what kind of funding you're looking for, we possibly might be able to help. Yeah, I'm not saying we're experts by any need, but both me and Ali are quite passionate about supporting women's groups.
Can I say something?
Yes.
You know, because we work with African women, refugees and asylum seekers, most of them in the asylum category, they are failed refugees, and they fall in a different category in terms of what the funders want to see or hear. They are normally in an irregular situation, and they have so many complex needs. So in terms of restricted funds, they are not normally supported with many funders. So how can we support this group of women using our own way of fundraising as a women's collaboration network, and creating those fundraising strategies that are not grants oriented, so that we get like unrestricted funds? How can we create a resource of unrestricted funds in the sector for women?
It's a great question. It's not one that I feel it's quite a difficult question, to be honest with you, and I think one that we definitely need to think more on and also discuss, you know, as women's groups together. Yeah, it's definitely a huge issue. Yeah, I'm not really sure what else I can say at this point. You know, I think it's a massive problem, and not something that I think we've come across a solution to necessarily. As I said, through the project, through the Labyrinth Project, we are doing a lot of work in terms of kind of mapping needs for women in different areas of England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and this has come up especially for I think Black and minoritized and refugee and asylum seeker groups, that there's just such a big gap for them in terms of funding, applying for funding, because they're generally smaller and they're not able to get those funds, and then they don't have those positions on strategic levels, so then they can't, you know, there's no voice there. Yeah, it's a huge problem, and I think it's something we need to take away and talk about more, I think. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on that. It's quite a tricky one.
Grace from Collaborative Women. This is why I think, and this is a key point to what I was saying before. I think too often there are either, especially when you're looking at, say, from a local authority perspective, sometimes it's either the big guns that local authorities already know and they've been working with for a while, which is great and gets a part of their agenda done, but at the same time the space doesn't allow for a new and more flexible way of working with different organizations that say local authorities still aren't reaching as part of the community. And for us, this is why it's also looking at how, as a more productive and I guess probably working more efficiently space, as we're all working with women and for the better pathways and opportunity for women, is to see how we work more collectively with each other in order to, if you are an organization that's been going for 30 years or whether you've just started in the last 6 months, there's going to be skill sets and knowledge that we can bring to the table, but it's how receptive, and as you said, Alia, in terms of how we as a collective break the barriers down to say we're working together for the betterment of citizens of this country, regardless of their status, and get the work effectively done. It's how we work and collaborate more together. So I think for me, it would be more about what if we could set up a network that enhances everybody, but at the same time, be more powerful to sort of help change the narrative within the funding space to say it's not just, say, collaborative women, it's us and others, but we are being seen as a collective rather than separating us out, but it's also what we do together to work together.
Yeah, I was just going to make a really quick comment. I went to a big networking stroke workshop held by the Women's Resource Centre, and they are doing a bit of work on that at the moment. I would definitely have a look at their website, and I think there's kind of like a sign up or get in contact. They've recently produced a bit of research on funding in the women's sector and done some recommendations, which has been shared by the Rose Foundation. And I think one of the big pushes at the moment is participatory, I always get that word wrong, grant making, which is basically having women with lived-in experience on these panels, you know, that make the decision. So I would definitely jump onto their website, have a look at the report. Rose Foundation is a brilliant organisation also. They are the only funder that basically at the moment just funds women's organisations, and are doing a lot of work to map the sector. So yeah, I mean, they were ones to also to get in touch with if they know about these networks. Yeah, that was just what I'd add.
Thanks, Emma. I think I would add one more thing. I realise we're running over a bit, but just to say that we are trying to do this work, you know, on local levels in terms of this collaboration and supporting, getting bigger organisations to support smaller organisations. So through the Labyrinth Project, Nottingham Women's Centre is doing a lot of work in their local area, and they're supporting and building the skills and supporting capacity building for organisations in their area. Up in Glasgow, Women's Support Project have specifically done their kind of mapping of women's services on women at risk of harmful practices, and they're also now doing a lot of work with community groups in their area. So we're definitely trying, and hopefully we can share that learning and build more of a national network as well. And Collaborative Women, I think, are you based in Leeds by any chance? Because I think there's a lot of work happening with Women's Lives Leeds as well.
Based in Trafford, Greater Manchester.
Ah, okay. So I got you confused with another organisation, but I know, yeah, also in a lot happening in Leeds, and actually in Manchester, we're working with Manchester Women's Aid, the Pankhurst Trust as well. So hopefully they've been in touch, but if not, maybe we should put you in touch. But yeah.
If there's nothing else for now, I'm just going to say thank you everyone for coming and for taking part in such a wonderful discussion. And I hope to see you in our next session, which is next week on the 13th, same time. Hope to see you then. Thank you very much, everyone.